right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Let more, people will just kind of roll in. But hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope your day so far. My name is Jenna Feldman. I'm part of the DC Startup Week organizing team this year. So thank you so much for joining us. As a quick way of background, DC Startup Week is a 5-day conference we have every September focused on building the startup community. We want to give a quick shout out to our title sponsors, Next, powered by Shulman Rogers, Insperity, WIS, and Technology Rivers. If you have any questions throughout the talk, you can enter them in the general chat function within Zoom. We just ask that you put question in all caps in front of your question so that the panelists, the speakers, will know that it's a question from you. So we're so excited to have David Gorodetski, founder, COO, and Executive Creative Director of Sage Communications, as well as Ashtan Moore, co-founder and partner of the Model B digital agency, to showcase the power of digital advertising. So please join me in welcoming David and Ashtan to the DC Startup Week stage.
Yeah, I have enough show up to the party. I was so nervous earlier, counting the minutes and how many people will show up. So welcome. Thank you for spending the next hour or so with Ashtan and myself. We will try to do our best to share some tips and how to do some digital marketing, digital advertising by yourself. It's based on our experience and knowledge that we gained over the past 2 weeks, right, Ashtan?
2, 3.
Yeah. So here's how we're going to do it. We have about 4 sections. We'll make it interactive. So if you have a question after we kind of graduate from one section to another, we'll take a stop and we answer a few of your questions. And we'll take it from there. So Ash, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Good afternoon, everybody. As Jenna said, I'm the co-founder and partner at Model B. We're a digital agency that focuses nearly exclusively on omni-channel advertising. So my background is, I've been doing this, as David said, about 3 weeks now, so I've got a little bit of experience with it, and excited to present to you guys today on the ways that we choose our channels and the way that we measure our results, and pass it back to David for him to take the first half.
Thank you. So as Jenna said, I'm co-founder of Sage Communication. We are integrated full marketing, communication, PR, and digital agency. We do everything quite good, but there's some area where Model B doing things better, and that's why they're here with us, because we actually working with them quite often, some of our clients and some of their campaigns. So I'm glad to share the space here with Ashtan. And so welcome here. This is really what we're trying to do here is to teach you with this workshop how to approach digital advertising. And I'm going to showcase some more advanced campaign, but the methodology and what to do and the consideration are the same if you're doing it yourself or you retain an agency to do the work for you, or if you're curious enough to get into this industry and start to learn how to become a digital advertiser expert. So we're going to talk about this new section, the personas, but in essence, it's really to understand who your target audience. And we build a methodology that has those 4 phases. Each of those can go either deeper or not as deep as what I show here, but in order to measure the effectiveness of your advertising, digital advertising, which I assume is all going to be paid advertising, right? There's a big difference between earned and paid digital. And so we are talking primarily on paid digital advertising. You need to make sure you set all the criteria, you know what your KPIs are, because you want to see that you don't spend money for nothing. And so what will be your conversion? How many of that conversion will turn into sales or influence or whatever? You have to know who you're talking to. So we're gathering data, and that data will guide our campaign And you'll see how when Ashton starts to speak to those, how they all tie together. Um, the traditional kickoff, but you can ask yourself the same thing is like, what are the requirements? What are your KPI? Most of you will be surprised how many of our clients cannot define their own KPI, especially if it's coming from the marketing organizations. Sales organization can say, yes, we need X amount of leads, or we need X amount of sales. It's a very clear KPI. But the marketers, not necessarily. Their KPI will be, oh, we need to increase traffic by, or we need to do that, but those are not true KPI. And so in order to start to create a baseline, set your KPIs, and then start to develop the messages. Now, how do you know which messages to develop? Which one will work? You have to understand who you're talking to. So in a later slide, I will show you how we do that and how far we go to identify who they are, why they matter, and how to approach and how to reach them. And then we create those assets, either written assets or graphical assets, through phase 3, where we build creative elements, the concept, and the asset that we'll use throughout the campaign. And then it goes to evaluation and implementation, which we'll talk more with Ashton when we go to that section. The key consideration is break large clusters into your primary and secondary target audiences. And what I mean by that, you might say, listen, I want to talk to financial industry, right? I want to talk to the health industry. Those are too broad of a cluster. Within that industry, you need to break it down into who with that industry you want to talk to. Are those technical people? Are those financial people? What level are they? How much responsibility they have? Are those decision makers or influencer to the decision makers? So break them down into the primary and secondary group. All of that will help you to define how you reach to them. Get to know them, where they are, what their age, the occupation, because all of those will tell you what will be the best digital channel to reach them, what time, in what frequency, and what will be the type of message. Know what makes them act. For example, if you talk to someone in the financial industry who oversee security, cybersecurity threats, you need to know that the messaging for them is not necessarily about cost saving, it's more about security criteria. And do audience segmentation messages, and I'll show you how does it look in the next slide.
An important thing to note there, if you don't mind me jumping in real quick, David, is this is the opposite. Digital advertising is the opposite of a Super Bowl commercial. So what I mean by that is instead of showing one video to half of the country, instead, when building out your personas, you're able to pick a very highly segmented group of humans who will want to get a very specifically defined message that you've made for them because your ability to do targeting and digital advertising, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's always better to define more with digital advertising as opposed to being zoomed out and who your personas are.
Right. And so look at that example. It's way too complicated, but the methodology will be the same if you do it for yourself or you do it for a small client or large client. Then really the main criteria here is to know who they are, why they matter, what do they want, and how you can help them. So define why they matter, really define all of those bullet points of what do they want, right? In this case, this is one of the world's largest air conditioning manufacturing from Japan. It's one of our clients, and you know it was part policy awareness, and so we said who are the people we want to talk to, right? Institutional and clients and consumers, and we asked what do they want, right? All those definitions. It helps you to set micro campaigns and measure those micro campaigns as you go along. So you don't spend all your money on one campaign and it fails. You keep monitor that in real time.
David, we have a question from Adam Cole, which is how do you find your personas? Do you use tools or just open source?
We use tools. We use methodologies. And we use research, hi Adam, and we use different methodology that we have developed over time.
Another great way to sort of hack persona development, David, smack me if you would never do this and tell me I'm completely wrong, but it's to look at your, whether you're a product or service company, look at your happiest customers and clients and study them. See, like if you're already in the market, look at who's buying your stuff, look who are the repeat buyers, look who has positive things to say about it, and you can kind of go the reverse direction by modeling based on traction you're seeing on your product.
Okay, I love to smack you when you go to science logic. So you're right. You can always rely on what works. And Ashton is right in the sense that when you have clients that are loyal clients over time, you want to rely on that data to continue to grow. However, in one of our case studies we'll show you here today, it's the opposite effect, right? So some of the large big four technology brands out there have clients who they locked in, not necessarily because they provide them the best service, more so because it's easy and to maintain them and very difficult for those clients to walk away from those big providers. So it's not always be the case. I think that there are existing data and we always do a preliminary scanning of audience and competitors. So for example, what we'll do, Adam, in the most simplistic way, we will go out there, we learn from our client who they think is their competitors. We will do a scan and think who we think are the competitor, and we'll do a competitive landscape of positioning, persona, traffic analysis, messaging, and so forth. And we add that to whatever marketing assets, content, visual that they have, all go into the evaluation, how to reposition them, how to create a persona, multiple persona, right? It's a big difference if several years ago, there was no need to create micro personas, right? You said my target audience are 35 to 45 people with a household and 2 kids, and you talk to all of them the same way. But because of social media, because we have more intimate conversation, you have to create a micro persona to know exactly who they are. And that's where the power of digital advertising really comes to play. And Ashton will show that how to create the funnel to reach those micro personas once you know who they are.
One quick second. Seth LaPierre asked, David, how frequently and with what cadence do you recommend updating your personas, assuming they're like real people and they change?
Yeah, so as marketers, I always ask for consistency and over time. If you deviate often, you'll never get to the point to actually measure the effectiveness of your campaign. So I would rather to focus and take as much time as necessary on the front end to do all the research that needed to create the baseline and create those personas, then to execute the campaign over time. Now, I'm not saying that we're not going to change the assets, the messages, or the advertisement that we trying to attract and make those persona act. That we will do. But changing the persona is more difficult. And if we do that, that means that we have to recreate all new assets and readjust the campaign. And that's costly and take time. And it's frustrating for the client and the agency, right, Ash?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So not as often, unless you launch a new product or deviate from where you are or have a new business objective. I don't see that question. So is there anything else or should I keep moving forward?
We did have one more from Adam Cole, and he was asking, what's the most cost-effective way for a startup with a limited budget to approach the persona build?
Yeah, so I would start with a very detailed, and I'll show you, listen, one of the things you can start is just look at the matrix that I have here. And I can share that with you guys later if you want. is to define your target audience, right? Who they are, why they matter, what do they want, and how you can help. This is really the broadest way to start to create persona for your target audiences. And then I'll show you more examples as we move along. And I think there are some tools out there to start to create personas. All right, so going back to science logic, um, it's a medium-sized DevOps automated um, system AI solution providers that really decided to take heads on the big four. I'm talking about the big four, like the IBMs of the world, big four. They want to talk to those type of audience, right? Those are the decision maker within the IT ecosystem in the client they want to go after. And so we have to attract those people. And there's, and Ashton will add to that, that, successful digital advertising require know who you're talking to, have incredible, relevant, and effective messages and visual assets to attract them, an easy place to convert them when they click through, convert them to a lead, and an advanced system to then follow the lead, turn them into clients. And part of it is Ashton's way to discuss it. But just kind of in a high level, those are the type of people we want to talk to, right? And now the question was, how can we make those people act? And for me, act is meaning they see an ad on LinkedIn, for example, they have to click on the ad, they have to land on a conversion page with a form, they have to fill the form, and that leads them then captured by science logic. So,
and just to tag on to that real quick, it's important to remember that the ability to do what's called narrow casting or incredibly targeted ads, that's a double-edged sword because your competitors are probably doing the same thing if they're any good at targeting. So you have to remember when you're building your personas, you have to make sure that you understand the pain points that is actually going to drive them to action and put that into the message, put that into the creative, put that into the video, because it's a crowded space and you're going to have other competitors and other people all bidding for these person's eyeballs. So you have to make sure that you stand out, and not just by having a really beautiful thing, but also by telling them that you solve for what you think their greatest problem that your product solves for is.
So Ashton is right. What you see here is just a definition of the persona. It doesn't tell you here what will make those people act. And what we want to do is we want to tie between what science logic, our client, has to offer, and these personas, and connect between those two in something that will make these personas act. So here's how we're going to do it. First, we'll have to position the product, right? Which goes back into the key consideration. We need to know who the competitors are for the product and services that you have. We want to know how they position their services, how they measure that, what's the tonality, what's the persona, what the price, where they do it. We need to build enough assets from testimonials and success case studies in order to position ourselves as a trusted partner and position our brand, ourselves, for someone within our organization as a thought leader. By the way, when I say us, I'm talking on behalf of our clients. So it's not Sage subject matter, it's someone within the client subject matter. Seeking a third-party endorsement, that could be either through earned media or through getting an analyst provide an overview of the industry. And in the case of Science Logic, we did use analysts to provide overview of the industry. And that was one of the hooks that we allow people who click on the ads to go into a landing page with a conversion form in order to access the survey that analyst did for us. And basically use truthful, factual information based on transparent data and research that then you can show and prove that what you have to offer actually works. So I'm going to give you a quick example of how we do it yet with another client, and then go back and show you what we end up doing for Science Logic and how we connect all the dots in order to make those people act. Just so you know, this is an example of federal buying team. And the reason why I did that is because it was really important for me to show you who are those people within an organization. So within a federal agency, you have agency executive, program manager, IT manager, the contracting people, and the integrator. The same thing will be with the Science Logic potential customer. Within those organizations will be the CEO, the IT people, the security people, the contracting people. Who are they, right? And what are they taking care of? What's the responsibility, right? From policies and regulation to mission and budget to architecture implementation. When you add that to the personas, right, and the customer audience matrix, now you have a complete methodology of start to plugging in your messages. I'm sharing the screen here in a second. So here's what we decided. Working with the Model B and with the client, we decided that video assets will work the best. Those are video assets that will be on LinkedIn and some other social media channels. And we want to do something that will do a few things. A, will make people act, will be memorable, and will hit those people at the core of the issue. So think about that. You have big four providers who have legacy clients for years, who are using legacy technology systems. It's very difficult to separate to look at something else. In a way, those big clients, those big four providers, look at those clients as, for granted. We know they're not going to leave us. We know it's almost impossible. They've been with us for 15 years. They're never going to go away. We don't have to invest in new development. We don't have to do anything. We're just going to continue to milk them. And so here's what we've done. We did two things. A, we start to work on a definition of a storyboard based on the persona that we developed. And we said, okay, those people usually hit by salespeople. So when the big four trying to maintain them and keep them, the people who talk to those audience are salespeople. And which means there's a bit of a grid goes there. So we developed that storyboard. And then, let me just go and share the screen. I need to share a new screen here. So I have few with only 30 seconds. And here's how grid come to life.
If you're using a Big Four ITOM monitoring provider, here's the brutal truth.
I see you as a cash cow, and I am milking you for all you're worth.
The truth hurts. But unlike these guys, Science Logic is investing in your success. Ditch the Big Four and switch to Science Logic. Learn how Science Logic can help you move toward automated operations with AI Ops.
So we have done a series of these ads. I'll show you another one.
If you're using a Big Four ITOM monitoring provider, here's the brutal truth.
I'm pushing solutions that were built back when I was cool.
The truth hurts. But unlike these guys, Science Logic is investing in your success. Ditch the Big Four and switch to Science Logic. Learn how Science Logic can help you move toward automated operations with AI Ops.
You'll also notice that these videos are very short because they're meant to be distributed via digital. So they're not anything, they're not going broadcast. They're something that you can quickly consume when scrolling through a feed.
If you're using a Big Four ITOM monitoring provider, here's the brutal truth.
I plan to abandon the market and let you coast on a legacy ITOM system.
The truth hurts. But unlike these guys, Science Logic is investing in your future. Ditch the Big Four and switch to Science Logic. Learn how Science Logic can help you move toward automated operations with AI Ops.
Yeah, so Ashton is right. They were short, and I show you 4 of them. I think we had 6 altogether. And then we create more static assets that we use on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter. I can't remember all the channels, Ash. Right?
Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, lots of LinkedIn, lots of Twitter. Twitter was highest performing for these, actually.
Right. Right. So you see what happened here. Once we recognize who were the personas, what will make them act, how to remind them that the Big Four take advantage of them, and what Science Logic has to offer, we repeat the messages verbatim time after time. But the hook, the cow, the golf, the disco, whatever else we had, keep evolving, keep changing, and we rotate those assets throughout the campaign. This campaign, with everything so far, the results of the campaign were really out of the roof. They were outstanding, much better than industry standards. There were some challenges that we'll talk about in a second, but we were hitting the thing right on the mark. And so people start to share that, and it's, in a way, become a bit of a viral too, because of how quick it was funny, it was hitting that right on the spot. And that's why the creative, the messages, and the persona development, knowing who they are, why they matter, and what we have in order to, that they need, work perfectly. Before we go to channels, do we have any questions related to that 2 section? No, Ash.
I think the most important, yeah, I don't see any questions here. I think the most important part of positioning is, at least in my view, is making sure that you're messaging for that pain point that you're solving. It doesn't matter if you're selling a shoe, a piece of gum. It doesn't matter if you're selling, massive enterprise IT. It's getting in front of the right people and saying the thing that actually compels them to take that action. And this incredibly creative campaign, David also took a direct shot at the competitors, which was a lot of fun too. So let's talk about channels. Channels is how you get your creative from the cutting room floor to the faces of the people that you are, that you've outlined in your personas. So as we know, I've been saying this for a million years, whatever your production budget is, if you don't have a distribution budget or a paid budget for the video that you're creating, or for anything, a white paper, for the fact sheet, for the whatever it is, cut off some of that production budget and put it into paid, so that you can actually bring it out into the eyeballs of the people who matter. Another important thing is that you consider your channels and meet people where you are. B2B, for example, historically performs terribly on Facebook. It can work, so we try it sometimes, but we generally don't put a lot of budget on Facebook for B2B things like Science Logic. Instead, we focus on, when I say meet them where they are, it's not just figuring out how to target them on these different platforms. It's also thinking about what mindset they're in when you reach them on that platform. So, people on Facebook are looking at photos of their nieces, nephews, cousins, babies, all this fun stuff. They're not really in the mood to consider reaching out to somebody on a platform where they're interacting with their families. The other important thing is that you you do a strong platform mix. And what that platform mix means is, they call it omni-channel. That's making sure that you try different things, or different platforms. So as I noted, Science Logic's campaign best performed on Twitter, which is abnormal. Twitter is usually not the highest performer for for a social media channel. People don't engage as often as they do on ads on Twitter as they do in other places. But in this specific instance, because we tested out the platform mix, we saw that based on results, we should double down on the Twitter budget. So we did. The next thing is, that really for most advertisers, something really important to consider is that you don't really need to scale beyond the fundamental platforms until your budget gets pretty big. Those fundamental platforms can be generally, it's a mix of search, social, and display. The most basic campaign that we suggest that, all clients, all people use is, a couple of social channels, Google Ads for search, and then display, but not even affinity display, which is targeting people interest-based with display banners. And the most basic campaign, we actually recommend that you just do retargeting from your landing page and follow them around with display banners, as opposed to trying to do direct display, because display for a first engagement generally isn't very high. They're much more likely to engage with you through a social channel. I'm going to switch the screen real quick. Actually, David, do you want to answer that question? Did we do A/B testing on the banner ads?
Yes, we did. It was in a way by a default. We had multiple assets. We decided to start the campaign with 2 of the assets. We knew the one that started to pull a lot better, and then we continued to refresh them. So yeah, we did. We usually do.
Yeah, and recommended you A/B everything all the time. You don't need to go crazy and come up with 30 different colors of the same ad, but really the important thing is testing your message first. It's like, what words are you saying that are actually driving people to interact with you? And then you can follow up with testing of the creative once you've figured out the message that works.
Right. Our A/B testing is usually a bit different than the traditional A/B testing, because the messages that we have developed has proven themselves prior to just use on the digital advertising. We use messages for earned media as well from our PR team, and we use it for the marketing side. So those are proven messages that we know that will work.
Exactly right. And so let's run through platform options real quick. So shopping is Google product, Google Shopping. It's whenever you search for something on Google, now you'll actually see product ads. I'm sure everybody's noticed it. You'll see them in the images. You'll see them all over the place. So that's a different network from Google Ads or Google Display. It's still Google. It's still accessed, primarily the same way. And then Amazon is another great platform for products as well. So Amazon, you can actually sign up for Amazon and display ads for people searching for products on Amazon. Highly recommended channels for anybody selling a consumer-based product, because they can be very successful, drive lots of acquisitions. I will caution you, Amazon gets a little steep. They like to take a lot of your money. Google Shopping recently announced a few months ago that they're actually letting you advertise on it they call it free. It's not quite free, but it's much more cost-effective way to get your product out there. But they are rather complicated to use. So we generally don't start campaigns on shopping. It's only once we've proven a product and proven a message that we start scaling that up. The next one, search, is super important, because that allows you to find people who are already looking for you. The perfect example is a plumber. Like, you can do a Google search ad for plumbers. That you can say, I want people in the zip code who are searching for plumbers, and then boom, you have an acquisition. It's really that simple. The only challenge is that everybody knows that. So you'll be bidding on Google works on a bid basis, so you can tell it how much you're willing to pay per acquisition. So you can say, I'm willing to pay $50 a phone call from Google search because I know that every time, out of every, and I model it like this, they say, just analyze the number of acquisitions you're getting on that platform. We'll talk more about metrics in a minute, but that's how you can say, and the number of conversions from leads or phone calls. So if you're running a campaign on Google and you look at your results and you see that 10 people have called you, you paid $100 for each call, and you close one of those, and it was a $2,000 sale, you're at a $2 ROAS. You spent $1,000 to make $2,000. That is probably expensive. A good ROAS you want to look for is at a baseline, generally 3. This is just a general number across the world. Generally 3. If you're driving to 5, you're great. But again, search is wonderful because you know that those people, you can bid on keyword phrases that are people who are actively looking for you. Social is very different. Social is delivering a message to people that you decide to show it to. So you say on social, I want to reach people of a certain age and a certain area who have specific interests. Fun and disturbing fact, one of our analysts recently shared in our advertising Slack channel, Facebook has an option to advertise to people whose pets recently died. That's weird and sad. But that said, it's got mountains of data. Facebook knows everything about us. It knows more about me than I know about myself. And Facebook is now tied directly to Instagram. So very easy to advertise both on Facebook and Instagram at the same time. Again, for more consumer-based products. For more business-based products, you want to start thinking about social platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter. Those are great ones. They've got lots of reach, incredibly sophisticated targeting options as well. LinkedIn is great as a B2B, as a business, because it allows you to pick companies of a certain size and market to people with a specific title. So if you know that the director of marketing is your target buyer, you can actually advertise directly to directors of marketing on LinkedIn. Word of caution, because they know how good and valuable that targeting is. It's also generally 5 times more expensive for the CPM than other social channels, but it can be 5 times worth it. Display is, now people like to harp on saying that banner ads don't work. That is not true. Banner ads work wonderfully on all different types of campaigns, so I always recommend you try them. And there's one type, as I said earlier, that you should always get into market immediately. And that type is retargeting. So that's just placing a pixel on your landing page through Google or whatever DSP you're using, and then feeding ads to people who have already interacted with you as a brand. So that is 2 things. One, it allows you to continue to message back to the people who have already expressed interest in your product. So they can get, you can build a lot of conversions that way. For consumer products, it works great for people. You can actually do abandoned cart campaigns where somebody put your product into like your shopping cart. If you have e-com, you can follow them around with little reminders specifically for that abandoned cart page and say, did you forget something? I'm sure you've seen them yourselves. And additionally, on the other thing is it's incredibly low CPM, cost per mil, which is cost per 1,000 impressions. So retargeting CPMs can be as low as $2 to $5 a CPM, depending on the platform. Each CPM netting you 1,000 impressions at that incredibly low CPM means that you can continue to educate your audience and the fact that you exist. It builds brand awareness, it builds a relationship, makes them like you more, makes sure your ads are pretty. So that you're driving value, all that stuff. David, it looks like you've got something to add.
Well, I got a question from Carla, which I can answer now or wait until the end because it's still related to the messages. So, Carla, I will answer your question when we go to the end because it's more specific. I think that I do want to add something, Ashton, that you want to maybe clarify because that might also be a challenge. You know, we will keep talking about creating a persona who know who they are, reach to them very intimately, But on the other hand, if you have a too narrow of a campaign target audience wise, you can run out of, and you can present, basically use only impression and not generate new leads. So at some point it's a give and take. How do you balance between the two, knowing exactly who you are and where to reach out to them versus going too broad?
Yeah, that's a great point. So, and we'll get a lot more into this into the metrics and when we start analyzing those. But the important point is, I think what David is encouraging me to share is a low CPM doesn't mean anything if it doesn't get you results. So I like the low CPM on retargeting, period, even if you're not driving a lot of results, in my opinion, only because they've already interacted with you. So they've come to your website, they know you exist. There's some reason, and if 100 out of the 1,000 people that I'm paying $2 to show a banner to are the wrong audience because they accidentally clicked on the website, we're talking about pennies here. So I'm okay with that. Now, on the flip side, there's another type of display advertising, which it allows you to target people based on their affinity. Google's ads are great. It'll allow you to choose geo, region, etc., and then shove a display banner based on demographic, psychographic, and interest. So those are the ones that you want to be a little more careful with and really watch closely, because sometimes a banner ad won't work until somebody's already seen you on social media and been able to interact with you, know that you exist. It's hard to drive an initial conversion from a display banner. Now, it's a lot easier to drive a follow-up conversion from a display banner, which is why retargeting is such a powerful thing. The last platform, just so that you guys know it exists, and I'll give you two examples. One is Share a Sale. The other one is Rakuten. And these ad networks actually do a cost per sale model. So it's not by CPM, it's not by click, it's actually by the number of products that they sell for you. So it can be incredibly valuable if you have the bandwidth, I'd say 5 to 10 hours a week to manage it-ish. I mean, that's on the high end. I'd say once you get comfortable with it, a couple of hours. But what it does is it allows you, the networks that already have existing agreements with bloggers and publishers and websites. So for example, you're selling golf gear, you can go in and say that with Share a Sale or Rakuten, you want those publishers to show your ads on all of their blogs that have to do with golf, and you can tell them that you will pay them $10 of the total sale if they drive a sale and it converts, and that conversion is tracked. So that could be very valuable for low budgets, but don't be fooled. Just because it's a cost per sale doesn't mean it's super easy to manage. So you will need to dedicate some of your staffing and human time to manage that, because otherwise it's a complete and total waste of time.
What's one quick question before we move to the next one? What would be a cost per sale average, if there is anything like that?
No, absolutely. So what you actually want to look at, rather than a cost per sales, you want to look at your ROAS. E-com businesses, or the return on advertising spend. Thank you, David. Your return on advertising spend should be at a minimum $3, because as a business owner starting a company, you have to imagine, there's a cost of goods sold and there's SG&A. So if you're not returning at least $3 for every $1 spent, you're essentially burning money, because you still have to ship products once you get the acquisition paid for. So 1 to 3 is a safe bet. Like even 2 is good in your first couple of months, and the reason why is you're proving that it has traction. Like generally our first month of advertising a product for an e-com brand we'll actually generally see like 1.5 to 1.8. And then it just goes up every month as we get better. New ads, better targeting, more data, more platforms, more experimentation. And we're always aiming our magic number and beyond is like when we hit that 5 point, we're like, great, we're making our clients money. We'll never get fired. They love us. Life is peachy. For a business, you want to do your math a little differently, of course. So e-com's the easiest because you can attribute that sale directly to your ad buy. Businesses, you have to decide, and I'm just going to use a service-based business for an example, and in fact, I'll use our numbers. Our average contract value over the years, in the $100,000 range, give or take, ish. Those are good ones, are some are. So with that understood, if I pay $100 per lead acquisition on Google, on LinkedIn, and I say, hey, I'm a digital marketing agency, fill out this form to download this white paper, and then we'll have a rep reach out to them. I have to make the decision on my side in my business on what number is reasonable to pay for that lead. And the way you do that is you look at how many leads you're generating per platform, and then you say, what is the cost of the lead? And then you say how many of those leads are closing and turning into business at your average $100,000 annual contract. So if you're paying $1,000 a lead for 10 leads, and one of those closes out of 10, you're essentially getting a $10 ROAS is how you can figure that out. So that's great. Do that all day. I would pay that all day if I'm closing 1 in 10, but also understand that your leads are going to be different on different networks. So you want to test to see if your Twitter leads are closing, if your LinkedIn leads are closing, if these types of things are closing. And I'm going to, I think, pause and answer a couple of questions unless you want to pop in, David.
Yeah, well, a question, by the way, $100 a lead on a business side, it's actually not that high. So I think we're used to it. Yeah, I think Adam has a question here for Pixel. We found that it doesn't give actual user data, but just show that you got a ping. Are we using it wrong?
That's exactly how it works, Adam, especially the Facebook pixel. Where you start getting user data is when you're generating acquisitions through advertising, generating impressions, clicks. The pixel exists on Facebook to just give you a way to tell whether or not somebody bought your thing. And so it doesn't really allow you to, unless something's changed. I have a bunch of really smart people who do this all day. But unless something's changed, it doesn't feed you audience data. It feeds you information of what they're actually doing on your website so that it can tell you whether or not the triggers that you've set are firing.
Yeah, for A/B it works. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How long it takes for ad generate sales? Sometimes never.
Sometimes never. Sometimes never, ever, ever. And David and I, as a general rule, love to ask the question of how many units have you sold? So I did that the other day and they said 100,000 and I said, I'm in, because it means that they've got a proven product in the marketplace. If your ads aren't working, you want to look at your products. Something's probably wrong. Like, advertising makes you money, period. I mean, and as long as you figure out the right way to do it and you test out different platforms and you have good creative, good positioning, and you're driving the data back, advertising will make you money. There's no question about it whatsoever, as long as you figure out the right way to do it. So if you have a negative ROAS, you probably want to take a really hard look at your product or really unique ways to get to market. Maybe it's channel partners, something else, bulk, wholesale, something that's not your traditional digital advertising.
In professional services, it might be different, right? There are a few indicators that if you got no sales, so let's say you got the lead, but you got no sales, it tells me that the advertising worked, you got the leads, the lead went to the conversion, went to your sales organization, but you didn't do sales. So that's one thing, and that falls on the sales organization. So maybe in the system of the customer relationship management or whatever didn't work right, the lead weren't good enough or qualified, and so forth. If you didn't get the leads, it tells me, oh, maybe the advertising worked, but then where the conversion took place, there was some flaws. For example, if you expect someone to fill 6-field form for a lead, forget about that. No one does that. So that tells me that people click on that, got to your landing page, but no one passed the landing page with the lead. If you don't get any click-through, something wrong with your messaging, and that could be either creative, messaging, or platform, or audience. So if you can backtrack that to what doesn't work, it will tell you the entire story why you don't get sales.
Exactly right. And so we have an example slide here. Real quick, MOS Creative asked, are there similar platforms for service-based businesses? When I was talking about ShareSale and Rakuten, you can actually do business or service-based businesses on those platforms, but they're just generally more successful with products. You'll move more. So because you just have a larger audience. So I generally never use the cost per acquisition for B2B. I'll use you know, the LinkedIn's and platforms like that, Twitter, Google, etc. So what we have here, guys, is like I said, advertising will make you money, but it will only make you money if you get your pattern right. Like, you have to make sure you're using the right platform and that you have essentially the right funnel set up. So for Science Logic, we had LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Google lined up to drive people to an initial landing page. And then what we did next is we retargeted everybody who hit that landing page with a follow-up ad. And then we kept increasing frequency by the number of clicks because it showed a higher interest. So what we did is we turned the bid up on the retargeting CPM on people who went further down the funnel. And you'll see on this, our second outreach also had a gated white paper to try to encourage people. It's like trying to bribe them. You're like, we have this thing for you, please hang out with us. Like, we want to be buddies. You have a present. So this is so the important thing to think about here is, what's your funnel? Like, so the easiest funnel in the entire world is setting up retargeting on your landing page. Easy. Put the pixel in, put the bid out, you know, use Google Ads to put it out, follow them around with a banner that says, hey, come buy your thing, come back. You left us, come back. It's a one-step funnel. They click on your website, you follow them with an ad. A way to add a second layer to that would be your shopping cart targeting. So if they leave an item in the cart, set up a trigger to send them a different ad that says, hey, you forgot something in the cart, so on and so forth. So just think about, you know, the ways in which, like, you set up the different phases of how you're messaging to your people, how you drive them in. If it's B2B, offer them white papers, information, free consults, webinars. Webinars are great for B2B. And if it's a consumer product, offer them sales. You know, say they get a 10% discount if they click on your ad. Just a great way to drive them back and actually get some people to move through your funnel. David, did you want to talk about the funnel at all?
No, I think you did an amazing job there. I think that maybe the one thing that kind of not shows in the funnel is, what do you do when you do like a nurturing campaign? So how do you basically mature a lead from really just capture an email initially all the way to make it at something that is a lot more qualified? But yeah.
Exactly. And so I would just recommend, if you are a B2B business doing any sort of lead capture, absolutely have an email funnel set up the same way you have an advertising funnel. David is the king of content. You can probably speak to that.
By the way, quick question here. Any experience with Pinterest?
Pinterest works, but generally, as I mentioned before, I don't consider it a fundamental, because you're not going to need something like Pinterest until Facebook gets saturated with the amount of spend you're using to reach your audiences. So it would add an unnecessary complexity to your day to have another platform to manage. I'd try the fundamentals first.
Let's move forward. I think I haven't forgot with Carla questions, so we want to leave a few minutes at the end for a few more questions.
Yeah, of course. So I'll just blaze through this. So at the end of the day, we already talked a lot about this slide, which is measuring your KPIs. Now, for any business, your final action is probably the best KPI to choose. Some people do want clicks. You know, if you're B2B, I'd recommend that you try to capture the information so that you can put them into your sales funnel. So you could say that your KPI, the one thing that matters, is your lead. Measure that across all the platforms. Make sure that you have things in place to measure your analytics before you go to market. 9 out of 10 times when we get our hands on an on a brand stuff, their tracking has been set up right. I mean, it does get complicated, but there are lots of free Google classes you can take. So you can learn how to use Google Analytics and just make sure that you're measuring your things. And then most importantly, make sure your KPI is driving organizational success. And that's revenue at the end of the day. So, and then when you communicate that success metric back to whoever's signing the checks, maybe it's you, make sure that you say that thing in a way where they get it. So you can say, I drove 20 leads, that doesn't matter. See, I drove 20 leads and the CRM says that one of them closed. So we closed a $50,000 deal with our lead campaign. So that's going to keep you with job security because you're showing that you're actually driving the business forward. Very last thing I want to say, I'm going to flip it to David, is to measure whether or not your campaign creatives are working. Look at that CTR. It's on every platform. It's telling you how many people see it and act. It can tell you if your positioning is set up wrong or your personas, your messaging is correct or incorrect for that audience. So it's either that or you're just messaging to the wrong people. And finally, your conversion rate is what's going to tell you whether or not you're targeting the right people, because even if your creative is good enough to get them to click through, you still have to convert. And that would be a shopping cart buy, or that would be a lead. David, I'll turn it back to you and let you answer that question.
We don't have, do you have another slide? I just want to make sure we.
Oh, just that. We can skip this.
Just, are you sure?
Positive. We covered.
So, oh, thank you. So let's go. I want to go back to Carla and then we'll go down to the question. Carla, how do you come up with the messages? It's basically, I can probably spend 10 minutes just trying to answer that question, but in essence, you have to look at what differentiates your service or product from your competitors, and what's the validator of your product and service, and what is the culture persona of your organization? How do you want to position that? And that start to create some criteria that guide your copywriting, your stylistic. When we go to messages, I like, because of our background, Sage background in earned media and PR, we work with a lot of key messages and proof point. So we rely on creating factual messages, something that you can back up with some data. And it's always then easier to use that information. I think all of those kind of go into consideration when you develop those key messages. And of course, you want to make sure that using the research, knowing that those messages can fall on open ears with your target audience. What else? We have another question here.
No, we're good on questions.
We're good? Okay.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you guys so much for having us and listening to us babble for an hour. We hope we did okay, and we really appreciate you. And thank you so much for having us too, Jenna.
Actually,
yeah, thank you guys so much for your oh, sorry, David, I just totally cut you off. You want to say some last words?
I was just making fun with Ashton that we have another minute. Does he want to finish that a minute too early?
You do have another minute. If you'd like to say one final word.
David, I'll let you have the last word.
Oh my God, I have audience and I can say a lot of things. No, thank you for spending an hour with us. Listen, Model B are brilliant at what they do. Sage is as well. They are our partners in so many campaigns. It just showed that even in a competitive marketplace, you can work well together. DC Startup Week, thank you so much for including us. Thank you for all the good work that you do. For all of you, be safe out there.